Welcome to our workshop on writing research proposals. Um, so, quickly taking you through the outline, I'll start by a quick introduction to Project EduAccess and OPP and your panelists. And then I'll hand it over to the panelists to take you through all the details of the research proposal. They'll cover various aspects, including how to write it, what structure to follow, how much detail to go into, things about important things like budgeting, use of AI, supervision, etc. This workshop has been developed by Project EduAccess, which aims project and initiative that aims to democratize access to higher education, particularly in the UK. We do so by four key interventions, which include mentoring, counseling, and role modeling, information, advice, and guidance, capacity building, and leadership skill development, and evidence-based advocacy. This particular workshop series has been developed by Project EduAccess in partnership with the Oxford Pakistan program and is part of our Pakistan graduate mentorship program for the year 2024. OPP is the first of its kind initiative that is based at the University of Oxford. Like EduAccess, it also aims to increase the representation of Pakistani research and scholars at the University of Oxford, but also the UK higher education landscape more broadly. So today we have, so this workshop is, as I mentioned, part of our graduate mentorship program. This is the 8th workshop. We have the recordings for all previous workshops available on our YouTube channel. And we also have 2 more workshops remaining next weekend, which will be on academic writing and interview preparation. And as usual, all details will be shared with you beforehand. So today we have with us 2 very wonderful panelists. We have Junaid, who is doing his DPhil, who's a DPhil student in engineering science at the University of Oxford, and we have Ali, who is doing his DPhil in history at the University of Cambridge. Junaid and Ali, thank you so much for joining us today. And now I'll hand it over to you both to take our mentees through the presentation.
All right. Hello, everyone. As it was introduced, my name is Junaid. I'm going to talk about the important thing which we are here for, which is what is a research proposal, and then we'll go into things like different steps that we need to make sure we have those in our research proposal. Okay, so first of all, when writing about the research proposal, a key thing that you want to keep in mind is that a research proposal is basically a concise and coherent summary of your proposed research. So basically, you will be studying, or you'll be doing some literature reviews, and you'll be studying on the internet and some reading about what's going on in the current field of your interest. For example, engineering, then you'll be exploring some papers into the from the IEEE Explorer and something like that. What you need to do in your research proposal is you write a very concise and coherent summary of what you want to do in your PhD, and you tie it with your current experience and expertise as well. So so it basically sets out the central issues, the questions that you intend to address, and generally it covers the general area of the field of study that you want to do. So through the research proposal, you tell your assessors that this is my area in my PhD that I want to focus on. So that's the very important thing, that you want to do it, because otherwise it will be very difficult for the assessors to know which field do you want to do in your proposal. Okay. And secondly, its research proposal is a central part of application of your PhD application. It presents the research idea, the question that you wish to explore through your PhD thesis. When you submit your PhD application, a lot of judgment of your profile happens through your research proposal, and I'm going to give you some tips on that later. So one other thing is you need to consider when you are writing a research proposal is for whom you're writing the research proposal for, or for what country you're writing the research proposal for, or what university that you're writing the research proposal for. So all the universities have some guidelines given on their websites, which they give, and so that sets out the expected format or template that students are supposed to follow. So the key takeaway I want you to take from this slide is that whenever you're writing a research proposal, make sure you're writing it concise, coherent, and you need to propose some area, some study in any field. Next slide, please. Okay. So as I mentioned, that it depends a lot for which country you're applying for. For example, if you're applying for in PhD in USA, then in US, the applications are more general proposals, whereas in UK, you want to be a little bit more specific and you want to be a very well defined at the start. And similarly, in Europe, the people would be, sometimes the interest would be to have multidisciplinary proposals from the university guidelines. So always check the university guidelines on reading what is expected from a research proposal. And so one thing that's very important I want to mention here is it also depends on the reason that the USA requires a more general is because most of the PhD programs in USA are taught PhD programs. There's a teaching component associated with it where you will be taking some courses and then you'll be doing the research. So that's why in your first year, you're mostly doing your courses and then you modify your proposal based on the courses that you've taken or maybe any interest you have developed. Whereas in UK, for example, in Oxford, there are also two different programs. The one is taught, which is basically there are courses that students take and then they write the thesis on it. But the one that I am doing is not taught. So it's purely research based. So that's why when you would be submitting the application like my program, then it needs to be a very well defined from the start so that you can, because it will be sort of a guideline for you throughout the 4 years of your journey. Next slide, please. Okay, the two words which are typically comes in mind or confusing is the research proposal versus synopsis. So generally, in the research proposal, it's a complete plan and outline of your study. You need to talk about that's what sort of experiments that you will be doing. So you need to talk about different methodologies that you'll be doing, and importantly, the timeline that you need to do to complete your study. So you need to touch a little bit on the timeline, like how much time would you need to complete the study. So the people who are assessing your work, then they would want to see the answers to these questions precisely answered. So what will be your plan for data analysis and what will be your methods of data collection? So most of the research involved, for example, in engineering, I can talk about like mostly it involves collecting some data. So you need to talk about how would you collect the data and stuff like that. In that regard, it is sometimes useful to see what university that you're applying to do and what labs facilities that they do have. So then it would be much better than you can connect your research proposal with the labs or the department that's currently working on. Whereas synopsis is a quick summary. It doesn't require that much amount of a detail, and it's very essential for the research to convey the key ideas of your research. It's just only an introductory section of your report. So primarily, it tries to persuade readers that you grasp the issue, the research area that you are trying to target, and then you have the capability to offer a solution. So which you prove through your background in your writing. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, why do we need a research proposal? So as I mentioned, that research proposals are primarily used, these are the central part of your PhD application. So professors, and there will be a graduation committee or something, some group of people, they will want to check if you have the quality of, if you can produce a quality of work in academic environment. So it also gives them the idea that how prepared you are for your doctoral research, because the doctoral research is very demanding. So you need to convey two things. One is you are prepared for your work. So basically saying that you have done your homework so far. And then basically then you sort of convey that what is the area that you are going to work on in your next coming years. So the key thing here is I want to point out is the quality, originality, and coherence in your proposal. So think about, because you'll be doing the literature review for the research proposal, so you'll be seeing multiple ideas. So you need to prepare a garland of ideas into a pattern which is coherent and which makes sense. So you need to connect the dots from the different papers and propose your area of study based on those papers or something. And you need to be very original in your writing. And trust me, it's very easy to identify if you copy a proposal from somewhere, or if you just taken few ideas and implemented into your research proposal. So make sure you write your original work and it makes sense as a whole. Secondly, as I said, typically you would, when you're writing a research proposal for a university, you need to look for which university you're applying into, what labs facilities do have, what faculty do they have. So basically your department will be sort of, when they'll be assessing your application, they will be seeing that whether they would be able to support your study or not. For example, if you require this, if you want to collect this much data on say you want to collect data on the brain, like electroencephalography and something, and for example, if a particular department doesn't have a facility on that, then probably they would not go, or something other than like IR. You can propose to build such a facility, and you need to be very clear on your proposal, how you are going to build and where the funding will come from. So if there is so you need to do some homework on that for what group that you're applying to, and what facilities do they have. So importantly, since the drafting process of the research proposal involves a reflection on your intended research, so basically it sets the goalpost for your research. When there is a small a lot of flexibility in the proposal in that regard, that it's not 100% necessary that you pursue that exact goal in your DPhil. So it's sort of a 80%, you can move around a little bit as you move on. But generally you want to convey a very crisp and original work in your studies, in your proposal, sorry. Next slide, please. Okay, so now here are the summary of the things that, oops, sorry, my light gone. There is a motion sensor in my room, which turns off the light if I don't move around too much. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to summarize what are the key things that you need to do for when you're preparing for your research proposal. So check the guidelines from the university. All universities will have the guidelines. Probably they will have some template in which that you want to write your proposal for. Important things to notice is the format, length, and the different sections they want to include in your they want you to include in your research proposal. Formalize with expectations. So try to see what is expected from a research proposal from that particular university, what the admissions committee is looking for. So generally the universities set those expectations into the template or in sort of a guidelines or in somewhere in the application process. So then choose your topic. So basically identify your interest. So far most of the students will have done in bachelor's or master's, so they would probably know the particular area that they're working on. So you need to expand a little bit on more on that and try to see what's happening into the current state of the art research in that area. And so try to see the different labs, what different labs are working on, what in around the world, and then you can identify the interest area that interests you most. Um, Conduct your preliminary research. You'll be doing a lot of literature review, so you cannot write a research proposal without a literature review, which means reading current papers from the internet. For example, if you're doing DPhil in engineering, so probably you'll be reading some papers from IEEE or some subjects or some general papers. And importantly, I would like to point out here is that if you're applying for any research in, for example, in any particular group, try to read their papers as well and see what they are working on. So if you are interested in particular professor, so read their papers and see what the professor is working on and what his area of expertise is, so that they can supervise you in your study as well. So in that regard, you can, as I said, see different labs in the same area, try to see what the literature of the group. You can also try talking to some of PhD students in the group, but when you reach out to them, so please do your homework before you reach out to them, because they would be very busy as well. um, so so try to do your homework from the internet, study what's the current area that most people are working on. Then, and if you have a specific question, people do love talking about their work, so they'll really tell you a lot on what their interests are and stuff. But before that, you need to do some of your research before reaching out. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so once you have done your literature review, you have seen what are the topics that people are interested in, then you will be formulating questions that you want to address in your DPhil or in your PhD. So these questions needs to be very specific and such that it convey. Try not to be very general, so to try to be very specific in the questions, so that the admissions committee, they know you are very clear on your research. As I mentioned, you need to you need to ensure the feasibility as well, which is basically seeing that if any particular department has the facility of collecting the data, the equipment and stuff, to support your research on. And if there is not, then you need to think about how would that come from. So if you require a particular data set, for example, for your research, then you need to reference that data in your proposal, that this would be the data set that you'll be working on. If you are supposed to generate a data set, then you need to think about what sort of resources that you would need to generate that data set. Okay, and then finally, because you'll be doing a lot of literature review, so prepare a list of your literature works that you'll be citing in your proposal. Make sure you read through your work and include the recent studies in your proposal. I think that's what I needed to say. I'll pass it on to Ali from here.
Hi, thank you, Junaid. So I'll be covering the other half of the presentation. So am I audible? Can you hear me? Just
Yes.
okay, perfect. Thank you. So the first part of the research proposal is a title or a research question. A research question is usually, sorry, a title is usually a very short, clear kind of like phrase that reflects main topic or problem of your research. Um, and it should be very concise, very direct, very short. One of the suggestions that I got when I was writing my research proposal is that a standard way of thinking about a title is to make sure that your title doesn't include any colon or semicolon. It should be very short and very direct. For example, because I do history, I can give like examples from history. For example, gender, Islam, medicine in North India, comma, year, the period you're looking at. It should be very direct. The second part of your research proposal is your abstract, which I think should be between 150 to 300 words. It should be, I think ideally it should be under 200 words. And I think abstract could be really, really important because it summarizes your proposal. It includes your research problems, your objectives, methods, and potential outcome. And I think abstracts can be used when you are reaching your potential supervisors because I don't think they don't because they are all very mostly busy, so they can't go through and they get like tens of emails every day from potential students, and they don't have time to go through each and every research proposal when they are considering accepting new students. So every abstract is a good way to send them, to let them know what you want to work on. And if it's like something around 300 words maximum, then they'll be more willing to read it and get back to you rather than reading 2000 or maybe like 1500 words. Um, the third part of the third section of your research proposal is an introduction. It explains what you want to work on very briefly. Why is your research important and what is the gap in knowledge you are addressing? And from there, you can then move on to literature review, where you kind of like talks about all the key works that have been produced on your research over the past 2, 3 decades. And you can then identify A, why they are important, and B, um, why is your research important? Like, for example, कौन सी ऐसी चीजें हैं जो इनकी works ने address नहीं की? And this is where and then this is how you can position your research relevant in what you can position your research on key works को देखते हुए, but you can also build on those works. And then from there, you can then, in a way, think and propose your research questions, the concept questions you'll be raising in your research. It's also better. The other section that ideally should come after research questions are like the section of chapterization. For example, if you are doing social sciences or humanities, and there's like if there are like 4 research questions, there should be like ideally you can propose 4 chapters saying that my in my dissertation, my first chapter will address da 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 using these sources or using this data, and try to and use this methodology or this method to kind of find out a solution. Next slide, please. Perfect. So a research hypothesis, which it's kind of like part of your introduction, is your central research problems, which you hope to address in your research. It should be very direct. It should be very very direct, and and try to put it in a very concise way, I'd say, ताकि जो भी उसको read करे उसे देखते पता चल जाए कि this is what you want to do in your research, this is what you are hoping to get out of your research. It should be as it says in the presentation, that it should be novel. It should be something that hasn't been fully explored, but also it shouldn't be something which can't be you can't do in 3-4 years time. It shouldn't be something completely separate from the existing scholarship. Yes, next slide, please. Research methodology. In I think once you are done with your introduction, literature review, the third part should be you should be focusing. You should kind of like and research question. Then the question comes, कैसे करोगे वो research? And this is the section which your research methodology deals with. You kind of will show that what methods will you do to conduct this research, whether it be qualitative, quantitative, mixed research. The difference between qualitative is that data you have a smaller set of data, but it focuses on more closely on human experiences, behavior, and social phenomena. And examples of qualitative research can be interviews or case studies, or if you're doing history, or if you're dealing with, um, for example, papers or documents, then it would include a smaller set of documents, but you'll then go into in much more detail. On the other hand, quantitative research includes statistical analysis and data collection, and you'd rely more on surveys and experiments, and usually on a lot of figures, and then you can like try to by looking at that data, you'll then try to map out your results out of that. Um, while writing your research proposal, the other section to kind of like clearly mention in the other thing to clearly mention in your proposal is your data collection method. Data collection. How will you collect your data? Will you be doing lab experiments, or will you be doing archival research or field work? If you'll be doing archival research or field work, you'll need to mention in your proposal very clearly where you'll be doing it. For example, field work करना है तो कहाँ जाओगे, कैसे जाओगे, कब जाओगे, कौन से ईयर में जाओगे, वहां जाना क्यों जरूरी है, आर्काइवल रिसर्च करनी है तो रिसोर्सेज कहाँ पे पड़े हैं. One thing that you'll have to be very careful while kind of like mentioning all these things is that they should be doable. They should be practical. They shouldn't be very ambitious, because one concern that that your department or your faculty or your professor will have is कि कितने time का program है. Because in the UK you just have ideally 3 years. You can get a fourth year, which is a write-up here, but sometimes that's not guaranteed. And I think in STEM that's not. I don't know, Junaid would be able to tell us better, but from what I've heard, it's not appreciated that you take a fourth year um, for research. In social sciences and humanities, you usually get a fourth year, but universities usually aren't very happy about it. So it should be your data collection method and data analysis. Uske method, they should be very, very practical, and you should be able to justify in your proposal very briefly, though, because you'll be able to do it in 3 years' time. Next slide, please. Significance of your research. This usually comes after the section on, so there's introduction, there's literature review, there's research questions, how you will gather data to answer those research questions that you try to raise, how will you analyze that data, which is then usko use kaise karoge, and why is this whole process that you want to do is so important? Why is this research is important broader academic context, but also in social context. I mean, when I was writing my PhD proposal, my MPhil supervisor was very clear. She was like, she said in one of her emails, which I thought was which kind of like hit directly mere dil pe, because she was like, why do you think this research is important, or why would I read your PhD dissertation, or why would anyone in your field read this research? You need to answer these questions in your proposal, because they need to know that if we are investing in this candidate, if we are investing our resources, money, everything, the research that they will produce, how will they contribute, how will it contribute to the academic context, existing scholarship? But also you need to connect your research to you need to show that your research also has social implications. It can be translated into industry, it can be translated into policy making, and it has an afterlife in a way as well, कि इसके साथ बहुत से मसले ना सिर्फ हल होंगे बल्कि बहुत सी नई चीजें, it will raise new research questions. Next slide. Timeline and feasibility. So in your proposal, I think this is usually the last section after your significance and last paragraph where you summarize everything. Then I think that's ideally how it's done in social sciences and humanities, that you include like a table of timeline and feasibility, which like break down your research into phases, and that in year one, from month 1 to 3, you'll do literature review, and then in, for example, year two, if you're doing field work, um, in month 2 of year two, you'll go to Central Asia, or you'll go to Uzbekistan, or you'll go to Pakistan, or you'll go to, for example, Iran or Afghanistan, जहाँ पे भी जाना है field work के लिए. So you need to kind of like explain and kind of like justify that you will be able to produce a dissertation out of your research within 3 years time, or within 4 years times. And if you're applying to the US universities, I think ideally 5 years time or 6 years time, I think. So yeah. And then feasibility, explain why your research is realistic given the time, resources, and support available. And this is exactly like, this is what Junaid mentioned while he was okay, you need to kind of like justify why that particular department is important for your research, because if you want to do something and that particular department doesn't have the resources to kind of like help you do your research, they would not they would not consider your application, because it's not because your proposal is not good enough, it's because they don't have the resources to support your research, and they want to support your research. It's the same with supervisors, it's the same with money, it's the same with funding. Next.
Can I add one thing here?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So as thank you. As Ali mentioned, it varies number of years as well. So one thing I want to point out here is, when you're applying, you're probably looking for the scholarship as well, like the funding as well. Your timeline is also tied to your funding, so you need to think about because, for example, in Oxford, typically the fundings are 3.5 years. So if your funding expires, then you need to fund your study yourself. So that's the one thing that you need to tie in, or maybe think about when you're doing your PhD application.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't think funding organizations are usually happy to give you even one more penny than they absolutely have to. So you should be, thank you, Janet. You should be like really careful, especially when kind of like thinking about your research, but also writing your proposal. Like, for example, if there is funding available for 3.5 years, then make sure that your research kind of like it kind of like in a section of your research, you says that you will be able to you'll be able to complete your research within 3.5 years. So resources and budget, mentioned your resources you need, such as access to labs, software, equipment, specialized library, archives, databases, or traveler fieldwork, or if you need any language training, you need to mention that in your proposal. But also, while mentioning that, you also need to keep your word limit in mind. For example, I know about humanities and social sciences, especially at Oxbridge, some departments, their word limit is very, very, very short. Because like I remember when I was applying for history here at Cambridge, the word limit is, I think it should be between 600 to 1,000 words, your research proposal, and you can't include budget or resources in that kind of research proposal because you have to be very direct and you have to make sure that you say everything that you want to say within that. So you can take out um, resources and budget from these proposal, but if you have enough space, it's always worth mentioning these things in your proposal. And it doesn't just helps your department kind of like इस चीज के साथ के कितने हमें के कौन से resources provide करने पड़ेंगे, but it also speaks to your ability कि इसको apply करने से पहले पता है कि what things they would need to do this research, what resources, what softwares. It speaks to your ability as a researcher to conduct this research. Yes, next slide, please. Yeah, I think, Junaid, could you please, oh, supervision, perfect. I'm using my laptop too also. Yeah, I thought it was AI slide. Anyway, supervision, identify supervisors, research faculty members who work in your area of interest, tailor your proposal to align with their expertise. And I cannot stress this enough. Because I have done this. I have done this really, really stupid mistake that I once emailed my Cambridge proposal to one of the professors in Oxford, and it was like very much tailored according to Cambridge. She was very nice, but like she was very nice. She still kind of like she was very nice about it, but most supervisors frown upon it because they be like, इस मतलब क्या सोच के इसने email किया मुझे. So you need to be very careful and you need to tailor your research according to your supervisor, according to your department, as per according to your university. And the country you are applying to. For example, I think if you're applying to humanities and social sciences, and you have something you need at a different university, for example, resources or library collection or anything, you can mention it in your proposal saying that I want to apply to, for example, Cambridge for all these reasons, but during the course of my research, I would have to go to Oxford at some point, or to, for example, British Library or Wellcome Collection in London, or any libraries in London, National Archives, for my research. Mention potential supervisor and why their mentorship would be ideal for your project. There is usually no space to do it in a UK proposal. And because UK proposal, in a UK proposal, you already know the person you are applying with, you're hoping to work with. So you don't have to mention that in your UK proposal, but I think it's something that you should always mention in a US proposal because it's, as Junaid mentioned, it's very broad, usually compared to the UK proposal, but you also need to mention as many scholars as there are in the department who you can work with. Consider collaborations. Does your research align with other departments and research centers? Mention opportunities for interdisciplinary work. Yes, but also look at the university websites for specific research proposals. I think this happens more in STEM. They kind of like, I think Oxford and Cambridge and other universities in the UK, especially Oxbridge, they have their special websites where special sections on their website where they advertise their research projects. They also do it in jobs.ac.uk. Um, but so you can apply directly to those projects as well, and then show how the, I think we have covered this point already. Next slide, please. Things to avoid. Vague or overly broad research question. Be specific. Be very specific. Um, and I cannot stress this enough. One thing I just, yeah, you need to also think about the language of your research proposal and abstract. Try writing your abstract in a more simplified way as compared to your research proposal, because research proposal is usually just read by people who are expert of the field. Abstract is often read by obviously people who are expert in the field, but also by people who are considering you for funding, who might not necessarily be aware of the developments in your field, but also by people who are kind of like administratively processing your applications. Failing to connect your research to existing scholarship, show that you are aware of what's been done. It is up to you to go to do a thorough research on the topic you aim to work on and how it relates to work being done. I'd say absolutely do it. Go through everything that has been written on your field, in your field related to your proposal, so that it will help you at one point on at or किसी दूसरी जगह पे, because if you are not using that literature in your research proposal, you'll definitely be needing that in interviews with your supervisors, because they would kind of like try to ask you very politely though, um, uh, there's like really, really difficult questions about to kind of like judge how well you know the field. Weak justification of your method. Explain why your approach is the best for answering your research questions. Um, an overly ambitious timeline, we have also talked about it. Junaid and I both. Ensure your project can realistically be completed within 4 years, 3 years for the UK, and I think, yeah, 5 years for the US. Yeah, yeah. Ignoring specific requirements for different universities, countries, it is important for you to have a look at what the university and department require from applicants, both in terms of the content of the proposal as well as the format of the document you submit. UK universities, and I think the US university, all the universities are actually quite good at it. You find everything that you need for writing proposals, every instructions, um, on their websites, on their admission pages, because they are very, very, very specific on, they are quite like very specific on word limits, what includes in word limit, in that word limit, what doesn't include in that word limit, what sections they are hoping to see in your research proposal. I think one of the programs that I applied to in Oxford, they had even kind of like breakdown for this word limit breakdown for the sections that they want you to include and how long that each particular section should be. Yeah, perfect. Next slide, please. Personalize each proposal for the specific university and supervisor, because with each university your requirements change, the resources that you'll be getting, that the university has to offer, they change. The supervisor's interest, it changes also with the university, so you need to tailor your proposal for specific universities and supervisor, stick to the word limit. It is very important that you do not exceed the requirement. Check what the university or department says about the word limit and if it includes bibliography or not. Yes, they usually have all this information on their website, that if they don't have any word limit related information, it is worth reaching out to your department and kind of like ask them to kind of give you some instruction, like some guidelines about the research proposal. Don't send them a lot of emails because they are already getting like hundreds of emails per day. So, but do ask them. It's always worth like asking. Ensure that the footnotes are formatted uniformly, please. Yes. Check if the university or department provide guidance on the styling of footnoting. If not, then use one that you are most comfortable with. Also check if footnotes are included in your word limits. They usually are, but it's always worth checking. Show originality in your ideas, but ensure that your research is visible within the PhD timeline. Seek feedback from potential supervisors, mentors, or academic peers before submission. And that also includes your previous supervisors as well. You could reach out to them and you can request them if they have time to read your proposal. You can also ask your friends to do it for you. What really helped me while I was writing my a research proposal, and I was because doing it for humanities and social sciences. So I used to ask my friends in STEM to do it for me because it kind of like then helps me to think how to kind of like it, to kind of like make it more coherent and make it simpler enough for everyone to read it, but not very simple. So yeah, that also helps. Ask your friends from other departments or from other specialities to read your research proposal for you because it then helps you with coherence and clarity. Proofread carefully. Uh, a well-written, clear, and a concise proposal makes a great expression. Ensure there is coherence between all sections. Research questions, methods, and significance should all align. Um, Next slide, please. I think that would be the AI slide. And Junaid, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. So I think this is just the final slide. So AI is now very popular. It's being used. So most people have tendency to use it. So the question you probably would be wondering is, should you use AI in your research proposal or not? So most universities have the guidelines on using the AI. So good thing is, for example, Oxford doesn't consider AI as a taboo, so that you don't use it or something. So you can use it in your for drafting your research proposal. But the question is, what is it that you are using it for? So that's very important. So you can use the AI for improving the structure in your sentences, for improving the fixing the grammar issues, finding synonyms for particular words, or if you want to paraphrase a particular paragraph, you can use the AI like the ChatGPT, and they do a very good job on that, like give you very nice coherent paragraph. But what you shouldn't do is rely on AI's writing research proposal for you. So that's definitely not the case, because these tools have this thing called hallucinations, which is basically they can give you some wrong information as well when they are writing some things. And they'll make it so coherent that it will look like a very normal sentence, but somewhere in the middle you see, oh, what's going on there. So So make sure you do not write your complete research proposal from the AI, because they do increase inaccuracies, but you can use ChatGPT or other tools to improve the structure of your sentences. And I would suggest to whatever university that you are looking to or you're applying for, take a look at the guidelines. I think Oxford has a very good book on how sort of small booklet on how the AI you can use AI to support your studies or support your writing. And now again, coming back to the point that Ali mentioned, that make sure you proofread your proposal at the end of the day. So whatever you write, submit in the proposal, you need to make sure you proofread it, because as I mentioned, AI can make a lot of mistakes. So you need to make sure you do the proofreading yourself. Don't leave the proofreading to the AI. Yeah, and I think that's it. I mentioned this point that many universities and scholarships have the guidelines on how to use the AI ethically. So AI is not a taboo. You can use it as a tool to improve the structure of your sentences or paragraphs, but you need to write key things yourself. Okay, I think that's it. Can we go to the next slide?
Which
Yep.
I think are questions. If you have any questions, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ali and Junaid. So this is just a guide that we have on research proposals that is available on our website. So as Ali said, the floor is open to questions now. So आप लोग अपनी questions chat में भी भेज सकते हैं, वरना you can raise your hand and start asking. Essen, why don't you go ahead?
Oh, we cannot hear.
Hello,
We can't hear
this is
you.
Bakhnoor. I have a
Sorry.
question. The Oxford Geography Department mentions that the research proposal should be 2000 worded, but it does not mention the 2000 words includes the references or the bibliography. So, what should we like? Should we include the bibliography in the word
Yeah,
range or not?
yeah. For the Oxford, the references are not included in the word count. So the list of the bibliography is not included in there. So your 2000 limit would be, I think, only the proposal part. And it varies from department to department. I'm telling you from the engineering department point of view, but I think that would be the case as well. If you want to make sure, you can ask the department about that. Probably they will say the same thing. Ali, do you wanna say on it?
Yeah, Junaid is absolutely right. And I just checked. I think they say on their website, they say that the word count does not need to include any bibliography or brief footnotes. So it helps you, answers your question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Essen, can you please ask your question again? But we couldn't hear you before.
Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for such a wonderful session. My question is related to the timeline. To give you some context, I will be applying for the PhD and I'm a student of international relations. So my question is it necessary to mention the timeline in the proposal? If that is the case, how would one know that which part take them out of time? Like, how would we know that the literature review will take how many months and or how many years? So how can we, specify the timeline in the proposal? Thank you.
Junaid, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I can tell you a bit on the engineering perspective. But typically, year one you would reserve for the literature review, and year two would be sort of doing experiments and setting up the experiments, and then year 3 would be some sort of winding up. And it is not that hard coded. As I said, whatever you write in your research proposal is not set in stone in that way, but it's the thing that everyone would be interested in seeing, is that, have you thought about these aspects? Yeah, so if you want a rough guideline, then year 1 would be a literature review, year 2 would be designing experiments, setting up experiments, collecting data, and year 3 would be for the compiling papers and something. But in practical sense, it sometimes you spend year 2, year 1 as well on the collecting data and stuff like that, but that's fine. Hope does it answer your question? Okay, good.
All right, thank you. Hassan, you can just unmute yourself and ask.
I have one more question. So I don't know if the resource that you shared the presentation from 2022 has it, but I want to know if a proposal essentially has 4 to 5 parts, right? It has introduction, the literature review, background of the study, question, and all that methodology. So how should the percentage go? Like 20% of the text should be your introduction, 20% should be methodology. Can you give a brief, like can you explain in percentage and weightage?
I don't know. I think it is pretty subjective. It also depends how much words you need to convey what you want to say. But ideally, I think it should be like 15% your introduction, then 20% literature review, and then 15 for your research questions, 15 for your methodology, 15 for significance. I don't know, maybe something like that.
Yeah, so typically try maybe 1 paragraph on each section, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and be in your word limit. It varies a lot. It's very difficult to give a number.
Yeah, because and I think it kind of like varies from your research to from your field. I mean, varies for your subject to from your subject to subject. Yeah, because I think in history you have to kind of like really talk about the existing you have to like talk about your existing literature in social sciences and humanities as well, broadly, about your literature review quite in detail, because you need to tell what has been done on the field and what what things you'll do differently and how you'll address these gaps. So I think in history, the research proposal is usually like 50% your literature review. So, and I think it's quite different for, I think, sciences, because then you'll have to really talk about your research questions, your methods, your experiments. So it's pretty subjective.
Yep. And as you talk about through, I'd say sometimes it's not the case that you have a clear 1 paragraph for the literature review, but it's sort of a coherent story that goes on, and
Yeah.
as you go on, then you cite your literature in your story as well. So there's not a one single point that you complete your literature review and then you're doing that. So there's no clear line of demarcation between the two. But yeah, as I said, organize into multiple paragraphs, try to align with your introduction, literature review, and your methodology and conclusion, and then try to finish in the word limit, I'd say.
Okay, so there's one question in the chat from Hasnan. He's asking how doable is the idea to extend my MPhil research for PhD, considering I already know a lot about the area, and if the research proposal or the idea aligns with multiple departments, then do you approach them at the same time? Um, for instance, he's from a sociology background with a specialization in migration studies, so can I reach out to sociology and migration center at Oxford?
Yeah, I think that's what most people do. They usually, especially in humanities and social sciences, they kind of expand on their MPhil research in their PhDs. You just have to, obviously you have, because PhD is much more, in PhD, your topic is much more specific than it is in MPhil. It's more, you see the same things, but in much, much more depth. So, and I don't think you ever know enough about anything. There are always other things to figure out. So, and yes, you can reach out to multiple departments at the same time if your research falls, if you can, and I think you should, because it kind of like increases your chances of getting in, but also it really helps you with funding, because if you don't get like funding from one department, you can get funding from the other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
increases the
yeah,
collaboration aspect.
yeah. So yeah. So yes, you can extend your MPhil research into PhD, and yes, you can apply to as many departments as you want to. And I think we also missed one of the questions Alishba, she's asking, does the format for research proposal for master's program, I think it's the same for the one that we discussed for PhD. Yes, I think it's the same.
One thing I would add on that is, because mostly the master's program are taught programs, rather than, so they would be a bit relaxed on many of things, because generally a master's program, so check if they want you to write a research proposal or they want you to write a personal statement. So there's a difference between the two. So check on whichever program that you're applying for, what do they expect in their submission. So if there's a research proposal, and they want the same things in the guidelines, then this would be applicable. Otherwise, you would be following that guidelines that they have given you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think so. We're already over time, so maybe we can take one last question. Ehsan has his hand up again, so we'll just take the last question.
If my research proposal is exploratory in nature, and the events are still evolving, for instance, the rise of China. So what would you recommend to make the research proposal more convincing, because we don't have all the information at hand? And the related to this topic, my second question is like, if my topic is not exactly aligned with the potential supervisors at a department, would it, hamper the process, chances of getting selected? Thank you.
I don't know how to answer your first question, because I think I couldn't hear it properly. So what was the first question?
Sorry, am I audible now?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. If, for instance, if the research proposal is exploratory in nature, for instance, the rise of China, it's an evolving event. We don't have all the information at hand. So what would you suggest to make the proposal more convincing, because we don't have all the information? And secondly, if the proposal is not directly aligned to the potential advisors area of study, so will it, weaken the prospects of getting selected if it's not directly related to the potential supervisor?
Yeah. So I didn't know how to answer your first question. I think one way to put it would be, Okay, it is important because this is something that's currently happening. That's very contemporary. I think that is very important in itself. But also I think I might need some more information to kind of like figure out how to make it your proposal more powerful. Second thing is it really depends on your supervisor, your chances of getting in and your chances of getting funding, because sometimes your research doesn't align completely with your supervisor, but they are super interested in your research and they are more than happy to collaborate with you on it. So they pitch for it. And sometimes they're not very comfortable with supervising a project they themselves are not an expert on. So they are kind of like very cautious uh, while taking new students whose research interest doesn't align with them. So it really depends on your supervisor. So I think the best person to answer that question would be your potential supervisor, because they are very, very clear. If you could like just ask them if they'd be willing to supervise you, and if they are, then the chances of you getting in is very high. And if they're not comfortable supervising you, then chances are that they'll tell you before the application that they won't be able to supervise you. Junaid, if you have something to add.
Yeah, I think on the second point, I'll say the same thing. Typically, the supervisors doesn't have like a hardcore one topic that they're working on. They have they are peacocks, so they have a breadth of topics that they are typically working on. So it could be like try reading on the internet, and so you'll see that some of the work does align with the interest or something. Sometimes the websites are not updated. So in that case, you can talk to, as I said, you can talk to his or hers PhD student in the group, or talking to the supervisor as well. That, as Ali suggested, that's fine as well. Sometimes it's much easier to get a hold of a PhD student than a supervisor, so you can quickly have a chat with them and see what do they say, what's happening in their group. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you can also have two supervisors. That's also pretty common. I mean, it has been it's very common in STEM, but it has been on the rise in humanities and social sciences as well, because you can have two supervisors. So if there are two people in the department you're planning to apply to, who as a team can supervise your project, you can also try that. But for that, you'll have to reach out to one of them first. And if they agree to this arrangement, then they might put you in touch with the second supervisor. So it's always better to go through one supervisor to the other supervisor. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ali and Junaid, for taking out the time today for going through the presentation in so much detail and for answering all the questions. To everyone who's attended today's workshop, thank you so much. I hope you'll also join us next week for our remaining two workshops. Please note that we'll have the recording uploaded soon on our YouTube channel, and I'll just drop the link in the chat. And for any questions about the mentorship program or assigning mentors, please email us, because that's handled by separate team members. So to make sure that your query is addressed, please just drop us an email. Okay, and I've also dropped a link in the chat to some of the guides that we have on our website for developing applications, including research proposals. So you can just check out those links. So that's all for today. Thank you once again, Ali and Junaid, and everyone else. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.